case. Legitimacy.
At the top of the case, we have to be opposite or new, not new grounds. However, we're not new. They've conceded this argument that this is all granted decision. Their own part that they have read, where they read the syllabus, not the original decision, by the way, which is something I'll get to in a second. But their own evidence indicates, and I'll read you the line. It says that what the court affirmed in cases is the principle that the state has legitimate interest from the outset of the pregnancy in protecting the health of the woman and the life of the fetus that may become a child, which is all the reason why we are so opposite that in their promotion of potential life, which means all entirely predictable. The state does not have a compelling interest in this regard. It's in the case number one that we meet this our O'Connor evidence. We are directly opposite. It quotes from the actual decision, not the syllabus, which is the reason why you should not evaluate their evidence. You should prefer ours. Their evidence does not speak to this at all. Our evidence indicates that essential holding of the case would legitimize things like the undue burden standard as well as restrictions that are legitimized is because of a compelling interest in promoting unborn life, which is something that we get rid of. Now to the case number two that we should have new grounds. All of our defense above in terms of our we meet should answer all their arguments. However, we have offensive reasons why you should have new grounds. One is that all the generic check would always apply to Queen States. They'll still always have recourse, but in a world where we would always have to be just the opposite decision, we would only have 4 cases in the common counterclaim to win every time. They've also conceded this is all entirely educational. We have to be able to talk about new grounds. Otherwise, this links to all of our offense in terms of the affirmative, because this means we would always be just shackled to the status quo. We'd always only be talking about the limits imposed on the political right now. We would not be talking about any type of new political speech. We always remain shackled to this conservative status quo, which means we would only have 4 cases. Extend the two ways to our done evidence. He just says that it's something about the grounds on the plan. Our evidence indicates this is the reason why you don't get garner any of your offense, because every overrule would be implicitly a new rule, i.e. the very opposite of what is in the status quo would necessarily establish a new law, which means that all of their arguments about why the new laws are unpredictable are all inevitable in a world where you overrule and you just do an opposite, which means it can't garner a unique office. If I can see the reason why competing interpretations are bad, because it justifies a race to the bottom. We'd always just be able to justify 1% more limiting top interpretation. All of our defensive arguments, reasons why you should develop reasonability. We get rid of the state's compelling interest, which was the central argument in Roe.
Okay. Instrumentalization.
That also would mean we would just instrumentalize topicality. We would make it nothing more than about when you particular forms of debate or remaining shackled to conservative forms of politics. Case debate, topics hit the consequence. However, they can see that we access all their consequences arguments. We win the reproductive futurism is what legitimizes things like nuclear in the first place. This is just a reason about why we should be examining the reasons why these wars happen. This also access all their nuclear war claims on the legitimacy flow, because this evidence indicates we have to be able to look at the reasons why nuclear war happens in the first place. We control all the links and the internal link in this direction. Then the reason why this happens is because of an ideology of reproductive futurism. Additionally, our argument is that we do not. It's not that we issue all consequences. Rather, we should not make them the end-all, be-all of politics. This is proven by the piece of evidence they read here. This is the reason why they link to this argument about how if there's any risk of nuclear war, we have to remain shackled to the status quo because of this risk. This is the reason why we would never break out of it. Our code yellow evidence indicates there was always a risk of extinction, which means we just have to probe the reasons why it happens in the first place, which only the affirmative does extend. He extends arguments about why the individual will not change. However, he's conceded our element evidence much better on this question that it indicates that the plan would be able to solve our blind evidence. Indicates it actively shapes the subjectivity of women, which is the reason why the plan team concede. We don't have to win and argue about why abortions would increase, just rather that this is something that is promoted by the Casey decision so far as they can promote unborn life. Additionally, they say that we would ignore politics. There's no impact in any of their backlash arguments. We're political. We have a plan, which means this argument makes no sense. They send their Robinson evidence about why psychoanalysis can't explain. They have literally they have no explanation here, but it's not just repeating taglines or checking daily evidence, because we're not a total top-down prescription of psychoanalysis, whether we can synthesize the psychoanalysis with other forms of theories insofar as we have shortcomings, which is just a reason why the permutation solves, or reasonable why the permutation solves the Captain instances of author arguments. There's literally no explanation here to not allow any more than 2 in R. This is all happening now. This is abortions are, of course, because of things like reproductive futurism. The plan solves all these plans. Abortions happen now, which means they cannot garner any unique office. Legitimacy at the top, they say this key to prevent genocide will win all these impacts on the democracy flows. Reasons why this actually legitimizes and overcodes genocide, which internally turns all these claims. Extend the choice number 1, the democracy links all the reproductive futurism. They can see that our violence is happening now in the status quo. This is the reason why you should not defer to their nebulous scenarios. He even grants the 2 and C. They don't even have a scenario, which means the impact calculus of this debate. You should prefer the definite violence that is happening now because of reproductive futurism rather than their nebulous impact, which actually legitimizes the only impacts they all talk about. He says looking to the future good of how they concede argument that we do not deny predictions. Rather, we should not just make them the orienting point of our politics. He says futurism is not the root. They've conceded the argument that futurism, our code yellow evidence indicates this is exactly what makes extinction possible, because we can always identify some type of life that should be excluded. Our evidence indicates that extinction actually and nuclear use becomes a part of the ideology of the state. Insofar as we have to get rid of the identity that represent a threat to the future. He says that present equals narcissism. Our evidence, first of all, our evidence makes a comparative impact. It indicates even if we are narcissistic, you should prefer your own life rather than some nebulous impact. They have conceived the future as fantasy. Our evidence, we do not not resort to narcissism. Rather, evidence indicates that this allows people to live for others, for example. However, it should not just be wrapped up in an ideology that's promoted by the state. He said grouped arguments about why fear mobilizes. We're impacting your particular form of mobilization. This mobilization is done against people who represent threats to the future, which means it guarantees inevitable genocide. Or Cove Yellow evidence, Institute for Fox, and your Ross evidence article indicates that the extinction is always around the corner, but your ideology is exactly what promotes its very use. He says images of nuclear war solve this. Evidence just indicates we have to discuss the reasons why nuclear war happens. I've explained this above. As to reasons why we can access all these claims, because we explain the reasons why nuclear use happens. He says we value life claims. He reads as common evidence. However, this presumes a sovereign distinction between lives worth saving and lives not. This is all the status quo. We revoke this authority sovereignty, which means the internal links. All these things also links to all their arguments about why we have no value in terms of nuclear use. Our argument is just simply we cannot enjoy freedom in a world based on our group all the democracy claims he consider our Christianity, which indicate each refer this is specific to their own authors. It is proving cross-sects. We control the reason all democracy overcodes genocide. They also our rights evidence indicate this rights will always heteronormalize the subject. You can be accepted into the order only insofar as you play by the rules of the order. All of our evidence indicates that democratic peace theory is not supported. Democracy is promoting war and the status quo. Their legitimacy key to enforcement arguments are irrelevant. Our assault states not premise on abortion numbers, and there's no scenario for these claims. Our arguments are just premise on the promotion of unborn life. Now the counterclaim debate. They've conceded that it doesn't solve any of the firm. Our Zizek evidence indicates that even if they get rid of the written law, there's still an underbelly of the laws promoted through particular social norms. If we want to link to the dis out of the counterclaim, this promotes reproductive future. This is the reason why the counterclaim doesn't solve any of the case. Extend our block evidence, which indicates they always just tiptoe around the concern of politics as status quo. You have to take a radical risk. Our permutation is the way you can do this. Even all the arguments about why it links to the D-Day just prove more reasons why you should opt permutation, because there's that risk that you can only take in a world of permutation. Now, the process to make these concede that we outweigh all their education claims about their Elmore evidence. Our impacts are about the solvency of the counterclaim. Our evidence indicates that you become much more invested in the process rather than the product. Our Zizek evidence indicates that this means we never break from the status social order.
3 minutes.
Yep.
How much of that?
245.